spoke to the whole Jewish people in Bemidbar, Sinai, in the desert connected with Har Sinai. Bo'er Moed, לחודש השני, בשנה השני, בראשון, באחד לחודש השני, בשנה השני is Latezom Meretz Mitzrayim, on the first of Iyar, on the second year when they'd gone out of Egypt, and he said, Shiur es Reish Koladas B'nai Israel. He said the first foremost thing we have to do is to count all the Jewish people. The meaning of the word Shiur es Reish means to literally elevate the head of every person, but that means to count. And of course they didn't actually count the people, because that's dangerous. So they took shkalim, or chatzi shkalim, from each person, and they counted the chatzoi shkalim, not the people. So we see there are like two factors here. First of all, it was in Bemidbar. It's rather strange. The whole beginning of the Jewish people is in deserts, 40 years moving around the desert, and here they've just received the Torah, and here Moshe Rabbeinu was addressing them in no better place than Bemidbar. And then the first thing that he requires be done is to count the Jewish people. So Rashi tells us that Hashem was always counting the Jewish people due to his very special, what we might call affection for the Jewish people. He's always counting them. And so when so Rashi says that when they went out of Mitzrayim, he counted them. When they fell in the Ego, he counted to see who was remaining. And then he said when he came to Lahashreis Shchinosei Aleihem, when he came to place his, as it were, Shechina upon the Jewish people, then he counted them again. And it's brought down in the Zohar Kodesh and other places that the main purpose of this counting here was to, through the medium of the Mishkan, was to cause the dwelling of the Shechina on the Jewish people. So that's sort of the question, what's it got to do with counting them? Why would counting them be a medium of, through the Mishkan, bringing the Hashor Shechina on the Jewish people? The counting them doesn't seem to have to do with bringing the Shechina. And also, if you want to bring the Shechina on the Jewish people, then gather them all together in a nice, what we might call Balabatisha place. For example, invite them to some beautiful, well-known beauty spot, somewhere, or build, it's a problem from heaven. Hashem he could have erected some sort of an edifice or done something really impressive. And we see, no, it was Davki in the desert, number one, and secondly, it's through counting them. So if we think about it carefully and we look for a moment, then these two factors determine what this whole sefer is called. This whole sefer that we're now having learned of Matan Torah, and then we had Torah's Kohanim. We had all the laws of the Korbanos and everything connected with the Kohuna, and a few other things to do with the Shemitah, but mostly to do with the Avodas HaMishkan. And now we're starting a whole new chapter, as it were. And what a Yidden do, Yidden come along, and they call the whole story of the whole Sefer Bemidbar. And Bemidbar is a desert. Yeah? So that means that the whole Chumash is called desert. Yeah? So just, what's that got, what is the significance of desert to the whole development of this amazing Sefer? Particularly, Rashi says, the whole purpose is lahashosh b'nosei aleim. And you already have the Mishkan. So if you already have the Mishkan, that should be enough to bring the divine presence on the Jewish people. Why do you have to have a Midbar? That's number one. Come along the non-Jewish peoples of the world, and they call the Sefer numbers. Yeah, the name of this Chumash by the Goyim, by the Umas Oilam, is numbers. And also in English editions of the Jewish Chumash, and they call it numbers. So interesting that Yidden refer to it as Bemidbar, and the Goyim refer to it as numbers. So l'chera, they have a good point. Yeah? Have you got anything to do with bringing people?
Bringing people? Bring more people?
There's a couple of guys that I think should be here, but I don't know. And what happened with Batzal? So anyway, trouble is I don't hear, I can't really hear what you say. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So that's of interest that both of these factors are mentioned at the beginning of the whole Sefer. And that's the first pasuk tells us that this whole lead-in was made by Moshe Rabbeinu Bemidbar in Davki in a desert. And then the next pasuk says you must elevate the heads of the Jewish people. That means to count them. And we see that the whole parsha of the Shavua is busy with numbers. The whole parsha is full of it. All the tribes, and then the Levium separately, and then the Bechoros, and it's just full of numbers. And even Parsha Nosoi gets still involved in numbers. And that would tend to seem to have a very lasting effect on the development of the whole Sefer. So we need to understand what are these two general names. One, Bemidbar, in a desert, what's numbers? And we must assume that they have some very significant difference between them, and yet on the other hand, they're very key and they're very important to the whole development of the giving of the Torah after Sefer Vayikra. And it's got to do with the koyach, the Eibishter Kaviohu, to cause his Shekhinah, lahashresh, amongst the Jewish people. It's got to do with these two factors, Bemidbar and, how do you call it, numbers. So let's think and let's make an examination. What could possibly be the significance of these two concepts, and what do they imply? So, as is always, I want to tell you a story. We'll tell this story, and hopefully that will give us a lead-in to. Once a chassid came into the Rebbe Marash, And he was a very learned guy, very, very experienced. Of course, he wasn't just somebody, that wasn't familiar to the Rebbe Maharaj. And he came in and he said to the Rebbe Maharaj that he has a problem. So whenever he does a mitzvah or anything really worthy or anything really good, then he feels what's called in the Siddur, what's with you, Betzalel? You've got a disciplinary mention.
Yeah.
And he feels what's called by Siddim Yeshus, He feels good from having done it, and that goodness leads him to a sense of what you might call self-importance. Let's be euphemistic. We won't call it by the really heavy name Yeshus. But he feels a feeling of Yeshus, meaning, self-importance and his, where's your chumash, my boy? So the Rebbe Marash said to him, yes, he said, the answer to your problem is that you have to fast 613 fasts.
Fasts?
So the guy was shocked. I think I may have told this story maybe X number of years ago, but anyway, I think it's permissible for me every 2 or 3 years to repeat the same story. So when he heard that, he was already very sorry that he'd asked the question. He didn't anticipate that he would get such a drastic reply from the Rebbe Maharaj. He has to fast 613 fasts. So he sort of he stood there. He didn't know how to absorb the answer. The Rebbe Maharaj said to him, what, do you think that fasting means not eating? He said, fasting doesn't necessarily mean not eating. No, he said, no, that's weight reducing, that's taking off weight. You want to really take off weight, then you don't eat. He said, fasting is not eating. No, fasting means that when you do anything good, you have to do it, well, this is retain his body. That's what he really wants of you. And so when you come to eat, you ask yourself, why am I eating? What is this whole action of eating? For example. So you have to answer, I'm only doing it because it's part of his plan. Otherwise, I wouldn't really want to be involved. Yeah. I'm not, doing it because I am attracted to the food, but I have no choice. That he wants of me that I should eat. And the Rizal and the Baal Shem Tov, they told us that the reason you eat is that you have to be mavara and elevate all the... Very good. You have to elevate all the natutes and everything. That's why you eat. Otherwise, no real point in your eating. And he said, so it is with everything that you'll do in your life. You'll stop for a moment and you'll say, why am I doing this? What is this all about? And you will come to the conclusion that you're only doing it because he wants you to do it. And that's called fasting. And he said, by all 613 commandments, that's what you have to do. So the guy was relieved on the one side that he didn't have to fast, but he realized that he had a very powerful job in front of him. That he's got to change his whole line. He's very involved in learning and Torah mitzvahs. He's what's called in Lubavitch Sheina Yid. He's a very beautiful, praiseworthy Jew, but he's got it all in the wrong direction. So he's got to start fasting. So years later, one of the younger Chassidim at that time, yeah, later met him by the Reb Marashas. This was already after the Stalkers Marash, a number of years. And he met this Chassid, and he saw him weeping and, very, very much visiting the grave of the Reb Marash. So he sort of made a sign of, my eye, what's this? So the guy told him that the Reb Marash saved his life. The Reb Marash gave him a whole new existence, and ever since then, he's been fasting. So the guy looked at him, yeah. He said, are you serious? He said, oh yes, I'm fasting. And he said, my whole life I'm fasting. So that's the story that I want to tell. So now let's for a minute, let's examine what's this whole union of Bemidbar. And in the light of that story I just told, then we'll be able to sort of move into this whole idea. Is a midbar a very sort of attractive sort of place? I mean, in pure human terms. It's brought in Medrashim of our sages that nothing grows in the midbar, and therefore nobody dwells in the midbar because nothing grows there, and there's also no water there. It's a difficult place, the midbar. If I measure, why would the Eibishter choose that as a way of making the Shekhinah dwell on the Jewish people? He's got the Mishkan, and the Zohar Kodesh at the beginning of this parsha talks at great length about how Davke the Midbar, that's what caused our Shroas Shekhinah. So that's what the Shekhinah is. What's it does? So, I want to tell you a story, and that's what you helped me this morning with the Gemara Masechta Nedarim. There's a Gemara Masechta Nedarim, Daf Nun Hey, if you're interested in the... And it's written there that Rabbi Yosef, who was a very important Amoira, he was being served by Rabbi. And Rabbi was also very important. But he felt that Rabbi had got a little bit, slightly a feeling of importance, very similar to what we just told with Rabbi. Rabbi Yosef sensed that, that Rabbi, because just before that, Rabbi Yosef was like the Rosh Yeshiva. He was like the leader in that particular area. And somebody had asked a question, and Rabbi said, oh, that's not really a question, And he should have first of all asked the Rosh Yeshiva if it was really a question or not. So Rabbi Yosef sort of felt that Rabbi was getting a little... You follow? So he, all of a sudden, and also Rabbi gave him a drink of wine, and in those days they used to water their wine. The wines were tremendously strong. They used to be called maziga. The wines had to have what's called maziga. You had to put water, percentages of water in the wine to make it drinkable. And Rabbi Yosef had a very special preference as to how his wine was. And so Rabbi had given him a glass of wine which is exactly as he wanted it. So he was very pleased with that. And he was worried that Rabbi was also pleased about that. In the sense of, So what did he do? He all of a sudden said to him a very interesting word or pshat in the Gemara. And it's written in Pasha Chukas, at the end of the Shiur the Jewish people sang after the big miracle, when the miracle of the Be'er, after, you know, Miriam's passing, but I don't want to go into the whole bigger arenas over there. And then there was the miracle of the two cliffs from both sides, which closed in on the Amorites. You know, there was a lot of nisim happened over there. So the Yidden sang a song together with Moshe Rabbeinu. And in that song, it says that Mi midbo matana, min matana nachliel, nachliel bamois, yeah, and then Rosh Pisgo, or a guy, Rosh Pisgo, and Nishkafo Pnei HaYishimoyim, which is like looking out onto a section of the desert. So it begins with the expression midbar matana. From the desert you get a present, a matana. And then from that you get what's called nachliel. And what nachliel means literally a portion belonging to Hashem. Nachliel, that Hashem says that's his portion. And then from that you go further, you know, in the steps. But ultimately there's a guy, and then there's like a valley, and you look down over the valley, that's like a, you know, hashpalah. But at the beginning, you get a matana from the midbar. So the Gemara says, or that comes to teach us, that kol mi shemafkir es atzmai kamidbar noisnim loi haTorah b'matona. Anybody who makes himself unowned, how do you call it, who frees himself, or how do you call it, makes himself, how do you say, unowned, how do you say, well, unowned, you know, he's hefker, like something that has no bayalim, it has no owners, and he just is mafkir himself, then matana, he's given Torah as a present from heaven. The Torah is given to him as a matana. And then, mi matana nachliel. Then Hashem says, oh, this guy is my portion. Now that he's got the Torah in the form of matana, nachliel, Hashem says about him, he's my portion. And only after that, another couple of steps further, we say, wait a minute, this guy's getting so many, you know, very, very high levels, we have to make sure to remind him that he's got to push himself down. And so then we say, this person who's been zeichet to all of these amazing things, he's got to realize that he has to cast himself down. Because he got all of these, you know, he's got to cast himself down. How do you call it? He got to throw himself into the gorge.
Oh.
I don't recommend that the child walk up on top of the gorge. There's quite a few of them around here, and toss himself off. But you got to be able to do that in Rovnia. So I asked the question, what is this in mi midbar matana? And what is the sin of making yourself hefker like a midbar? So all of you should all put up your hands. Oh, and you should say that we had it just recently in Tanya.
Being busy.
And if I may say so, you had it not only in Tanya, but you had it on Lag Boima.
Oh.
And you had it in Perik Mem Tes. Yeah.
Oh.
And look it up over there, the Alter Rebbe says in Perik Mem Tes, and that is always comes out on Lag Boima. Even in a Shnasa Iba, somehow or another, the Friedrich Rebbe organizes the Shurim, that they fall out Lag Boima with this statement. The Alter Rebbe says you have to be mafkir hakol lahavosa yisborah. For the love of the Eibusher, you have to be mafkir everything. Okay, you have to disown everything. And he says you don't have to worry about money and not your wife and your children, not anything. You have to just be mafkir hakol. Oh, well, you guys, I once had a miser way back in the early days in Krachabad, in the yeshiva. I had a very choice Talmud. He's very close to me to this day. We learn, as a group of guys on Monday nights, we learn a Shiur on the Skype together. He together with another group of guys in Krachabad. We learn. And he, all of a sudden, his wife came into the yeshiva looking for Mendel, who was at that time just being elected the mashpia, you know. And she started to complain that recently her husband is just, he's not paying any attention to the house, and he's not worrying about the children, and she can't quite figure out what's going to be with the panos. All sorts of very profound complaints. You follow? So Mendel, he didn't talk English or whatever. Well, he had lived in England for a while, Mendel, so he knew some English. So he said, well, just leave it with me for a while. The next thing is, I hear that Mendel's looking me up. He wants to talk to me. I was very close to Mendel because he was the brother-in-law of my mashpia. My mashpia and Mendel, they were shvogers, Hedekot brothers. So I very willingly appeared on the scene, you know. So Mendel says to me, listen here, Gafne. He used to call me Gafne. He said, listen here, Gafne. He said, I got a young Yavad, but came in and she had complained of the whole thing. And she said, the guy happens to be one of your guys. So she said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say it's your problem, not mine. And he said, I'm passing the whole thing into your hands. He said, first of all, I don't speak English all that well anyway. So the next thing I get this job of putting this guy straight, you know, I've got to straighten him out. Because the Alter Rebbe does say that you have to be mafkir everything, including Isha Ubonim and everything. You have to be mafkir. So the guy's right, you know. What are we going to do? So what does it mean that you're mafkir yourself? You follow? What does that mean? And what does that hold? That through that you get the Torah a matana. Well, obviously, Rabbi Yosef, when he said this to Rava, that was the beginning of the whole Torah brought in the Gemara. Obviously, he meant something very profound with that, because Hashem says, oh, this guy is he's my nachla, he's my portion from now on. And so elevated he became that he has to toss himself afterwards off the cliff. But also we have to be careful not to take that too literally. So, let's solve the question, what does it mean? You have to be mafki yourself. So, I have another question. And that is that you guys are probably familiar with the 12 Pasukim that the Rebbe asked the kids, the children to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of them is a quote from a Gemara. It's not a puzzle. It's a direct quote from a Gemara, and it's a Gemara Masechta Megillah. So I'm pretty much giving it away. And it talks about believing somebody.
אם יגעת תאמין.
Oh, very nice. As the Gemara says over there, and it's a member of an Amoira. It's not a Sabraisa or something. It's one of the Talmudic sages. And the Gemara is quoting several things that he said, which it often does. It takes a certain person that doesn't occur tremendously frequently in Shas and quotes things from him one after the other. So there's a whole series of quotes from this somewhere, and they don't seem to have much connection, at least openly, one with the other. And all of a sudden he starts off, and he says, Im yoim alecha odam, if a mensch